Hi everybody, it's Mr. Jones here, and I hope you've had a great weekend. Hope you had a chance to get out and enjoy the great weather that we had on Saturday before all these storms came in today. I'm here on this video to tell you about what we're going to be doing during Digital Learning Week number 5. So our objectives for this week, we have two primary objectives. One is you're going to have a vocabulary quiz, our third vocabulary quiz, by the end of this week, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But we're also going to be learning some new techniques to create expression in our productions. So last week was all about experimenting with auto-tune and plug-in and audio effects. This week we're going to talk about something called audio automation and editing in your projects. So automation is an audio editing tool that makes automatic changes to MIDI or audio tracks in a DAW. In Soundtrap, we have 3 options for automated controls. These 3 are sweep, pan, and volume. Fade outs and fade ins that you've had a chance to use before in early projects with the editing button on your regions are actually automations. To access the automation controls in Soundtrap, step 1 is to go to the track header and click on what is called the automation icon. Once you click on that button, on step 2, you'll see a box appear, and you're going to click on the automation box. When you click on that box, a little window will pop up that shows you volume, pan, and sweep. The third step for what we're going to be doing, you should click on volume. Now, once you do that, you'll see a shaded image of the region will appear below your primary region, and there will be a horizontal line. In this case, that horizontal line represents the volume of the track. So if we move the horizontal line up, it would make the volume louder, or if we move the horizontal line down, it would make the volume softer. By clicking at different points on the line, you will create small circles called handles. The arrows in the illustration show you what these handles will look like. You can then click and drag the handles up and down to change the level of the control. These changes will happen automatically when you play the audio file, thus the name automation. Now let me show you how to access the automation controls. First, if you find the track that you want to make the automation control, look at the track header, and this last symbol in the track header box, that's the automation icon. If you click on that, you'll see this tab that opens up and a box that says automation. Next, click on this box, and then you can select between your 3 different automation options: volume, pan, or sweep. I'm going to select volume, and once I select volume, notice this horizontal line that appears under the track. That line represents the volume. Okay, if I grab the line and pull it down, just to click and drag, it pulls the volume lower or higher. Notice that as I click on the line, these small circles appear. These are called handles. Once you click and create a handle, you can adjust the volume by clicking and dragging the handles up to turn the volume up, down, up, and down. So once I play the track through automation, the computer is going to automatically make these adjustments to the sound. The next technique we're going to talk about is what's called a crossfade. A crossfade is an automation technique that's used to smooth the transition between 2 audio tracks by overlapping the 2 tracks first, then fading one track out while the other track fades in. The important part of creating a crossfade is that you overlap those 2 tracks. And if you look at the arrows that illustrate the fade out and the fade in, if we put those arrows on top of each other, we create an X or a cross, which is why it's called a crossfade. Now let me show you a great way to use automation to make a recording or soundtrack sound better. So I have a track down here that is some introduction music that I use for my own podcast. So as the music gets to the end of the track and then the vocal comes in, notice how abrupt the change is. Network. Hello everyone, this is Mr. Jones with your Digital Learning Week 5 update. So notice how the music just suddenly stops and then the vocal comes in. Well, that's a really kind of abrupt way to make that transition from one sound to another. But we can use automation to create something called a crossfade. So the first thing I want to do is I want to overlap these two regions so that my voice and the music is happening at the same time, which would sound like this.
Teacher, network. Teacher, network. Teacher,
Hello everyone, this is Mr. Jones with your digital learning. So it's still pretty abrupt when the music ends, and it's difficult to hear what I'm saying. So this is how we're going to use automation. So first I'm going to come to this track and click on the automation button, click on the box, and choose volume. Now I'm going to come over here to the music and click and create a handle, and then I'm going to click here and drag this down. So I've created a fade out. Now I'm going to come up to the top track, click on the automation button, select volume is already selected, and with this I'm going to start with the volume low, and then I'm going to create a fade in. So as this track is fading in, this track is fading out, and that's called a crossfade, and it's going to sound like this.
Technology, teacher, teacher, network, teacher, network, teacher.
Hello everyone, this is Mr. Jones with your Digital Learning Week 5 update. Notice that's a much smoother transition from one region to another, and that's what you call a crossfade using automation. The next technique that I want to talk about is what's called ducking. Ducking is an automatic technique or effect that causes the volume level of one track to be lowered by the presence of another track. This is a common technique that's used for background music or sounds. Notice in this illustration, the top track would be my vocal. The center track would be my music track. So while the vocal track is going on, I have the volume line pulled low. But then in these gaps between my vocal track, I want to turn the music up. So I can use automation to move the volume up in these gaps in my vocal and then pull it back down or get that sound to duck out of the way so that it doesn't interfere with the vocal. Now let me show you another effective way that you can use automation. So let's say for my podcast that the music that I have, I don't want it to go away. I want it to play in the background while I'm speaking. So I still have my fade out here, but then as I'm speaking, I'm still going to hear the music in the background.
Teacher,
Network.
teacher,
Network.
teacher.
Hello everyone, this is Mr. Jones with your Digital Learning Week 5 update. We will have a new schedule for Google Meets this week. All of my I can still adjust the volume as I need to get it right. Monday. Now the other thing that I've done is I've created some space in between my vocal dialogue. So now I can use automation for something that's called ducking. And so what ducking means is that as long as I have my vocal up here, I have the volume turned down. But when the vocal ends, for these gaps in between, I want to turn the volume back up. So I'm going to create two handles very close to each other. I'm going to use my playhead to find the point where that vocal ends. And so I want my volume to go up here. And then I'm going to move my playhead so I can see where the vocal comes back in. I'm going to create another handle, two handles very close to each other. And I'm going to duck the volume back out of the way. And then I'll come down to this next point and do the same thing. I'll create two handles very close to each other, turn the volume up while the vocal track stops, and then I'll create two more handles very close to each other and turn it back down. So this technique is called ducking. So I'm ducking the volume or ducking the music track out of the way so that it doesn't cover up the vocal. But I turn the volume up in between. And that's going to sound like this. 7th grade will be at 11:30 a.m. and 8th grade will meet at 12:30 p.m.
Network. Music.
Technology, teacher,
Network.
teacher,
Network. Music.
technology, teacher,
Network. Music.
technology, teacher.
Now the B-Day classes will have their Google Meet on Wednesday.
And obviously you can adjust the volume lower if it's too loud just by moving the handles.
At 11:30 a.m. and 8th grade at 12:30 p.m.
Network. Music.
Technology. Teachers.
Network. Music.
Technology. Teachers.
Network. Music.
Teachers.
Network. Music.
Also, on Friday at 10 a.m., I will have a Google Meet. So those are a couple of automation techniques that you can use to make your podcast sound much more sophisticated. The crossfade and ducking. So after listening to everybody's podcasts over the last week or so, I was really super impressed with some of the projects that came out. So what we're going to do is your next big summative project is just going to be taking those podcast assignment and you're going to expand that and produce it into something that sounds closer to like a professionally produced podcast. So in this project, what you're going to add to your podcast is that one, you want to include some intro music that you use a crossfade to move into your vocal. You're also going to use background sounds or music to go along with your vocal tracks using ducking. So in this podcasting project, you're going to demonstrate the use of automation. You're going to conclude your podcast by bringing your introductory music back and reversing the crossfade. So you're going to fade your vocal out and then fade your background music in as what we call an outro, which is the opposite of your intro. So your summative podcasting projects will be due Friday, May the 1st, which is not this Friday, but next Friday. So that gives you like a 2-week period to really get these podcasting projects sounding good since it's going to be a major grade. Just as a reminder, we'll have a new Google Meet scheduled this week. A-Day classes, our Google Meet is going to be on Mondays. B-Day classes, our Google Meet is going to be on Wednesday using this schedule. 6th grade Google Meet will be at 10 a.m. 7th grade Google Meet will be at 11:30 a.m. And the 8th grade Google Meets will be at 12:30 p.m. And then on Fridays at 10 a.m., I'll have an open Google Meet for anybody from any grade level or A or B day that if you need any kind of extra help on Fridays, you can come in at 10 a.m. on Fridays. For all those meetings, once you log into the portal, go to G Suite for Education, click on the waffle, select Meets, click on Join or Create a Meet, and then when it asks you to type in the meeting code, you're going to type in 632 Music Tech. So that's what we're going to be doing this week. Make sure that you check Google Classroom. I've already got the Music Tech glossary posted. I've highlighted all of the terms that will be on your vocabulary quiz later this week. You will only need to learn the terms that I highlighted in that glossary. I think there are 10 terms total. So as you alternate on working on your podcast, you're going to want to pull that up and start studying those terms. And I've also included a practice quiz that you can take on Monday to give yourself an idea of which terms you need to study and which terms you're already good on. The glossary that I'm sending you this week actually is going to be your own copy of the glossary. So if you need to annotate, highlight anything on the glossary, you can do what you need to do so that you can study and prepare for the for real quiz that will be later in the week. All right, folks, I hope we have a great week coming up. And always, you can email me any questions, heath.jones@gcpsk12.org. Let's have a great week. Bye.